Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Debra Rue, and I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact. And today I have a relatively new friend of mine. I definitely consider him a friend. His name is James Partridge, and he's the director of Face Equality International. I had the pleasure of meeting him. Actually, another dear friend of mine, Dr. Caroline Casey, introduced me to him when we all spoke in Geneva at the, remember when we used to travel around, at the Global Business Disability Network conference, which was amazing. And I heard James speak, and I got to talk to him, and then actually we interviewed him on the other show that I co-host, which is Access Chat, and we're going to make sure that we put a link to that episode there because it was pretty powerful. And I have learned so much from James, and I just think he's such an amazing person, and he has a powerful story to tell, and I think a story that we all need to hear, because there are things we're doing in society accidentally that are continuing to hurt people. And so I think you're going to enjoy this episode. I know I'm going to enjoy the conversation again, but James, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So James, you have so much to do to change the world. And but before we dig into that, tell us more about your journey. How in the world did you get here? And I can tell because I can see that your face does look a little bit different. I think you have a beautiful face, but I do. But tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay, well, I must say that I had, for the first 18 years of my life, a really near perfect face. I traded on it. I thought it was very, very important to my future. And then within 30 seconds, I managed to turn a car over and it blew up. And from being a happy-go-lucky person with a whole vast, array of expectations and aspirations and ambitions, I suddenly found myself in a burns unit. And I had no idea what severe burns were, but I had severe burns to my body, to my hands, but most of all to my face. And this was just such a shattering change. It changed my face, obviously, but it changed my life in a flash. And from there, I was really left in that strange limbo world of not really knowing what my future looked like. 3 months after my accident, I got the chance, or I'm not sure if it was a chance, I had to look in the mirror. There are no mirrors in burns units, but I knew I had to do it. And what I saw in that mirror was so shocking, so totally unlike me. My face was no longer my face, it was it. It was it with a capital I-T in bold with asterisks. I just couldn't imagine living a life with it. And that was the start, I suppose, of my journey. And even that night, after I'd seen myself in the mirror and reacted to it, even that night I was already judging myself with a whole range of judgments, aesthetic judgments, moral judgments that I had grown up with, completely unaware of them. I'm, conditioned completely to think that somebody who looked like me was doomed for failure. I mean, just couldn't. There was nothing successful in somebody who looked like that, and probably there was something really morally rather deficient about me too. It was a horrible realization. And of course, as soon
How
as
old were you?
I was
How old were you,
18,
James?
I,
You were
I was
18.
18.
Wow. Wow.
So I
Okay.
was very young. And that was the start of the journey. It took me probably 7 years of trial and error to find a new me. And it was a very new me, but it was a better me in many ways. But for years, I struggled. And yet. So that's the start of it, Deborah. Many people acquire disabilities through trauma. Mine was a very severe trauma. And now looking back, 50 years it is, I can say it was a watershed moment.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny if you think about it, thinking about it and how much we identify with our looks. And I know just a silly thing, when I was deciding, are you going to accept that you're 60 and you have gray hair? And I thought, yeah, I'm going to do it and put in some purple and have fun. But we put so much in societies, we put so much on looks, and it's interesting because sometimes people that are really beautiful, they're constantly underestimated because they're too beautiful, or it's so weird. And there's so many societal taboos and issues, and it's ridiculous because, first of all, you had to walk this terrible trauma, obviously with great pain, emotional, physical, spiritual pain. It's just mind-boggling. And I'm sure, of course, lots of lessons.
My realization of just how painful it was as soon as I left that hospital ward and tried to re-enter society, I was met with a whole raft of looks and reactions that I was totally unprepared for. The face is so important when we meet people, when we think of somebody, we think of their face. When we meet them, where do we look? Their face. It's where so much mood, so much personality is captured. But if you've got a facial difference, some asymmetry, some scars, and in my case, skin grafts all over the place, the signaling mechanism is kind of distorted and people don't know how to read it. And they don't even really know whether they should look or not look, and they're embarrassed. And so this, as you say, the sort of, the instinct is to avoid, and
right.
It's very difficult to sum it up, but I just felt a sort of draining of my self-esteem.
I bet.
I couldn't feel very much respect from myself because nobody else seemed to be showing it apart from one or two.
Right. Obviously, something was wrong. James, you're right. I mean, adults wouldn't know how to react. How did children react?
Well, in a way, they're very beautifully naive. I would find them coming up and asking me questions, shortly followed by their mother or father rushing in to say, don't, come away. And so there's a sort of social ignorance about this that is so difficult, because I wanted to calm the child, give some information to the family, but you can't do that if the stigma, and that's what it is, the awkwardness, the taboo is so great.
So you're walking this really difficult path, and then not only are you judging yourself and definitely finding you don't cut it, but society's judging you. And that makes me so sad, James. I know what an amazing man you are, and you're partially that amazing man because of these trials and tribulations you've walked, but you took this really, really tough situation and you turned it into social activism. And you were bringing up you were bringing up some points that as soon as you said it, I knew it, but I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about how often in movies and media, we make the bad guys, they're almost always the bad guys, sometimes the bad gals, we designate that they're bad by putting scars on their face or disfiguring their face. They're all the bad guys. And I had never thought about that. And I was wondering if you would just explore that a bit, because obviously you have thought about that a lot.
Well, in those 7 years of trying to adjust, one of the things that really did great so strongly with me was when I came across a Hollywood movie, an old one or a new one. The particular one that got me was Freddy Krueger, and the Nightmare on Elm Street genre. And there were lots of other ones, and some of the Bond movies.
I was going to say James Bond. I mean,
Exactly.
There's so many. A Phantom of the Opera.
Every time I saw those, they kind of added an extra determination to me, because I winced, I revolted at this stereotyping of people with scarring, facial scarring. And I wanted to see whether at some point in my life I could change that. And you mentioned social activism. It was 20 years on after my accident before I got anywhere near doing that. And that was really brought about by my great fortune, really, to write a book for Penguin. And it got a good review and got a good reception. And I ended up setting up a UK charity, an NGO called Changing Faces. And it was through that, I mean, setting up something like Changing Faces is a pretty crazy thing to do, frankly, but somehow I did it. This is 1992, before the internet, almost before computers. But we set out with the long-term view that we would challenge these stereotypes. We would challenge the other really painful one, which is you're bound to live a second-rate life. It's sad,
It is sad.
for you.
It is.
It's so sad.
Through no fault of your own,
challenge.
right? There's nothing you did except get in a car accident.
Yeah.
So,
and so many people have facial differences from conditions that there's no fault. People are born with cleft lips and palates and birthmarks and craniofacial conditions. They acquire facial cancers and facial skin conditions like psoriasis and vitiligo. They have all manner of accidents, and of course facial paralysis like Bell's palsy and stroke are incredibly common. And yet this whole community didn't have, it seemed to me anyway, a voice.
right.
And we were treated as medical objects. Oh, poor you, we must get some surgery to, fix that and make it look a bit better. And of course it is on the face, and it's bad luck. And I just thought, this is not enough. We need to challenge people's attitudes to this.
And if we don't, James, sometimes this stuff is so deeply rooted that we don't even know it's there. I mean, as I was hearing you talk, and you gave a great presentation, highly recommend him as a speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And you showed all these great examples of villains in movies and, shows and media that have scars. And I never thought about it. I just had never connected those dots. And maybe it's because I remember the other day I tweeted something about I tweeted something that I did not know about and that people were being discriminated about. And I just didn't know about it. And I was like, wow, I'm just shocked sometimes at how we discriminate against each other. And somebody said, well, it's because you're privileged. And I thought, well, okay. Okay. But it's more of, sometimes society just doesn't understand. How do you change society if we don't even know we have a problem? I think that's what's so powerful about your work.
I mean, I wouldn't claim to know of all the stigmas in other cultures, but I do know that in many cultures, facial difference is associated with bad karma, and people are ashamed of the child that they have brought into the world. The dreadful incidents of acid violence in some countries is brought about by some very, very, distressing attitudes, behaviors. We can't sort of lump them all together and say, it's all because of these baddies. But it is quite clear to me that stereotype, that trope, does nothing for the future of children and adults with facial differences. Nothing whatsoever.
Except hurt everybody. It just hurts everybody.
We are at the moment trying to stop, or at least get some control over, an Amazon Prime TV series that's being made in New Zealand on the Lord of the Rings again. And they have put out a casting advert for people with funky, weirdo faces.
Wow.
To the assumption that they're going to play the orcs and other baddies. Well, wow. I just find that disgusting. And we've got to change this culture. And I believe now the great thing about forming up Face Equality International, which is an alliance of NGOs around the world, there are 36 now in the alliance. The great thing is that there's a real sense of momentum gathering that actually we might be able to pick a fight, draw some attention to these abominations. We might be able to raise awareness of facial difference. And of course, it's incredibly important to find allies across a whole raft of equality issues. And it's great to find that they're with us.
Yes, and you know what? A lot of my audience knows that Doug Frust is my producer, is in the background, and he made a point in the chat window. Think of how many serial killers, say Ted Bundy, that were able to fool people because they were so good looking. Oh, well, he couldn't be a serial killer. He's good looking. So exactly. These are such important topics because people don't even think about them. These are so ingrained in our society. I have a colleague that works with us, and when she was born, the doctor made a terrible mistake and he split her face. And I think she's beautiful. I've never been one to see, I base beauty on who the person is. That's why I think you have a beautiful face, James. I love your personality. I love your work. I just love everything about you because I see the light in you. I see you. Namaste. My soul sees your soul. But it was sad when I was talking to my colleague because when she was a little girl, they took no pictures of her as a baby, as a toddler, as a little girl. She has no pictures. And I'm not sure what that message is. So she's always had these horrible self-esteem issues. And when I see her, I think she's gorgeous. I think she's beautiful inside and out. But I think it's so important when we have these conversations because I think a lot of people don't connect these dots. I know I didn't, sadly.
In some ways, I would argue that somebody like myself who acquired a facial difference in life and who had beforehand had the chance to acquire some self-esteem is in an easier position in some ways to adjust than somebody who's been born with a facial difference. And so much of how you adjust to it depends on the culture in which you are, the family dynamics, and so on. I was incredibly fortunate in many ways to not exactly land on my feet, but go to a university that had an open mind. I met some completely unexpected people there. I had some experiences that I would just never have believed. But gradually I managed to sort of find a way through all that. But I think as a child, a young adult, it can be extremely hard and to the point where you can experience things that you just want to forget. Some of the ridicule that I hear about, and particularly on social media, the social media abuse handed out to young women and men is just nauseating. And we have to tackle this as a whole society. It's not a, oh, naughty, that person. We've got to get this as a social, a new social mores, really. We need a moral code that says that is just not acceptable.
Yeah, and then I think of someone like my daughter, who I think is beautiful, who is born with Down syndrome, and people always stared at her their whole life. And when they stared at her, I don't know what they're seeing, but I hope they see this beautiful soul shining out of her eyes. And so it's not even people, your point isn't just for people that have been scarred or disfigured, or it's also for people like my daughter with Down syndrome that is different, right? She has different features from others, and so
absolutely
much wider spread, I think, than maybe people realize how this is. And James, do you mind talking more about some of the publications, because you showed me a publication when we were in Geneva that it was so beautiful, and it was, the people that were in it that, I don't want to say brave. I hate to say brave because I feel like I'm contributing to the stereotype problems that we have with this. But I still think I'm not sure what the right words are. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
The book is called Faces of Equality, and it contains 20 stories of people who tell their stories in a very dignified, very funny, very quirky way, and bring out all the glories of having a fantastic face, a really distinctive face, brings with it a distinctive life. And I mean, it has to be said that these 20 people are extremely well-adjusted people. They have been through the mill. They've come out the other end, although I'm not sure you ever get completely over some of these issues, but they are living very full lives. And if I may, I'll just mention my book, Face It, and which has just come out. And in it, there is a section in the middle with 12 short stories, I suppose you'd call them, of people, again, with facial differences in very different places in the planet, who tell of the injustice they had to face, but also their determination to make a better world.
It's, we need more people like that. We need more people like that.
I think the challenge for people with facial differences is because we have been kind of on the fringe, not really represented in any movement up till now. If anything, we would associate ourselves with disabled people and their rights, and certainly in the UK, I work very, very closely with many disability organisations and champions. But in many countries, these NGOs that are now part of Face Equality International feel very on their own.
Yeah.
They're not joined to any other equality movement or campaign or anything like that. And so part stronger, but that is to do with the power of cosmetic surgery. Cosmetic surgery has a grip over people's minds that is quite unbelievable, really. And I don't want to go into the rights and wrongs of having cosmetic surgery. I mean, that's down to individual choice. But the message that the whole industry sends is we can fix it, and you really ought to get it fixed.
Yeah, something's wrong with you.
Yeah, quite. And we really rather need the, should we say, the professional plastic reconstructive surgeons to stand up a little bit more and say, actually, there are many, many kids and many, many adults with facial differences for whom there is not going to be a fix. And it behoves you and our society to give them respect.
Yes.
Now, that's an interesting partnership that we did achieve quite a lot in the UK, getting associations of dermatologists and plastic surgeons to join the campaign for face equality. But that needs to spread and spread, I think, because we need more and more informed perceptions about
Yes.
the potential, the aesthetic potential of surgery.
I agree. And, you know, I look at the lines and stuff on my face. I have a place right here when I tripped over my dog and hit there's a story there, you know, so I don't need to, it troubles me a little bit because I also think, you know, the messages that we're giving to girls and women and thinking it's only about the love of the youth. And by the way, I love young people. I think they're amazing, but why don't we celebrate who we are every single minute of our life, you know, all of the generations. And I think there's a lot to do, but James, I know we're running out of time, so I want to give you an opportunity here. First of all, I want to make sure that you tell people how to learn more about your work and your book, and you're on social media, but also I want you to tell us, because the people that are listening to this program, they care about these things. Tell us how to help you. What can we do to get behind you to help you? Because I just think this is something that needs to be heard, needs to be seen, needs to be talked about. And because I think there's so many people that are impacted by this, and others that, like me, I hadn't thought about it to the extent that you allowed me to think about it. You've been a great teacher to me. So tell us how to get hold of you, how to follow you, how to get your book, but also how to help.
Let's start with the last question. I would really encourage everybody to go and have a look at the Face Equality International website, which is faceequalityinternational.org, and take a good read around it. Have a look at the sort of issues that we're talking about. Immerse yourself in it, read the blogs, and then consider how you in your own life might be able to raise awareness. Are you a healthcare worker? Are you a teacher? Are you in business, in HR? Whatever it is, take the plunge. Take this issue with you to your employer and say, look, this is something that we haven't really looked at before. Let's have a look at it. Let's raise it. And you'll be amazed at how many people will put up their hand and say, oh yes, my daughter has, or my aunt has, or yes, I know somebody who's a good friend of mine has a facial palsy or whatever. And before you know it, you will discover that this is a really quite commonplace experience. And if we're not careful, we will exclude all these people. So
right.
Look at how you can do that in your own life. How to contact me? Well, there's lots of contacts around the Face Equality International website. I'm on Twitter. and other things, JRJ Partridge. And I've got a website, which is jamespartridge.wordpress.com. And this book can be bought there, or it can be bought on Amazon or any of the other online booksellers. Face It, Facial Disfigurement, and My Fight for Face Equality.
And I want a signed copy. I'm going to get it. And then at some point when we get to move around again, I'm going to come for you and ask you to sign it. So, and another thing we're going to do, we're going to make sure that all of the links, all of his social media, a link to the book, please buy the book. And I will remind everybody as an author myself, please leave reviews, because that's one way that Amazon prioritizes what you're going to see. So reviews are so helpful for books.
Absolutely.
Right, James? Yeah.
Crucial.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you
we'll
very
send,
much.
we'll provide all the links to his website, the episode that he did with Access Chat. And once again, highly recommend James as a speaker. He's got such an important story that he's telling, and he's not only telling his own story, he's telling the stories of hundreds and hundreds of others. And this is, as it feels, James, especially here in the US, as we're burning everything down, why don't we really take a look at making sure that people can be accepted who they are across the board? And that means making sure that we're not terrorizing and torturing people with facial differences, which is what we're doing right now. We're just adding to the burdens that others are carrying. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. I think it can be better, James.
It definitely is not fair. And thank you very much for the chance to talk to you. And I look forward to picking up anybody who wants to contact me and, speaking further. No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes. And I'm there for you. You let me know how I can help. And I know the audience is going to be there for you too, because this topic is going to totally speak to them. And maybe, they knew more about it than I did, especially because my daughter has facial differences. But you just had brought up some points that I had not considered. So I really, really appreciate your work, James. Wow. And I'm going to let you go. I know you're actually having a barbecue in the back, and you're hoping your family's going to actually save you some food. I said, well, you probably just have carrots and
I can still smell it in my nose. So I'm hoping. Cool.
So there's a hope.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Thank you for your work. I'm going to provide all of the links so that you can follow his work. And please join me and James to make sure that we make these changes. And I will introduce you to the ambassador also on email. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Debra. Take care.